The 1% rule, tiny habits that quietly change everything. Most burnout does not arrive with a scream. It arrives quietly, almost unnoticed. You often feel the change in your body before you name it mentally. A tightness in the chest, a reluctance to speak, a desire to turn the lights off earlier than usual. The world tells you that to change your life, you need intensity, big moves, massive action. But for the quiet thinker, intensity is often just another word for exhaustion. And there is a different way to build. Today, we are talking about the 1% rule, but not through the lens of hustle culture or aggressive productivity. We are looking at it through the lens of sustainability, through the lens of the quiet mind. The 1% rule is simple in theory. If you improve by just 1% each day, those tiny gains compound into something powerful over time. But here is what most people miss. For many people, especially those who think deeply and feel intensely, this is not just a strategy for success. It is a strategy for survival. When you try to copy loud, high-energy systems that were never designed for your nervous system, you drain the very resource you need to function. You end up relying on willpower, which is expensive, instead of systems, which are quiet and cheap. In the next few minutes, we will strip away the noise around self-improvement. We will look at how small habits actually work in the brain. We will talk about restorative environments, and we will explore how momentum can be built without intensity. The trap of intensity. We live in a culture that celebrates intensity as proof of seriousness. Early mornings posted online, extreme routines, visible struggle framed as discipline. If it looks hard, we are told it must be working. But intensity is not the same as effectiveness. And for many people, especially those who think deeply and process internally, intensity is often the fastest path to burnout disguised as ambition. Think about how most self-improvement advice is delivered. It assumes that if you just push harder, wake earlier, stack more habits, your life will eventually fall into place. What this ignores is biology. Neuroscience shows that not all nervous systems respond to pressure the same way. Some people gain energy from stimulation. They thrive on novelty, external rewards, fast feedback. Others, and this is far more common than we admit, operate best in environments of calm, predictability, and internal clarity. These minds are not weak, they are deep. When intensity is forced onto a system that is wired for depth rather than speed, the body reacts before the mind catches up. Cortisol rises, breathing shortens, decision-making narrows. You may still function, but everything feels heavier than it should. This is why so many people end the day exhausted without knowing why. They were not lazy. They were not unmotivated. They were simply fighting their own nervous system all day. Here is a subtle but important distinction. Effort is not the enemy. Misaligned effort is. When you force change through intensity, you create a short spike of momentum followed by resistance. The brain registers the experience as threat rather than growth. And the next time you try to repeat the habit, your body hesitates. You procrastinate, you avoid, you negotiate with yourself. This is not a character flaw. It is a protective response. The brain is designed to conserve energy. When it senses that a behavior requires constant strain, it looks for an exit. This is why so many ambitious people keep restarting their routines. They confuse starting energy with sustainable energy. The 1% rule works precisely because it avoids this trap. It does not rely on adrenaline. It does not demand willpower. It slips under the radar of resistance. A 1% improvement is small enough that the brain does not argue with it. There is no threat, no alarm, no internal negotiation. You are not asking yourself to change who you are. You are asking yourself to show up slightly differently, just once. And once the nervous system learns that progress does not hurt, something shifts. Instead of bracing against the habit, the body begins to accept it. Acceptance creates consistency. Consistency creates momentum. This is why intensity feels impressive but rarely lasts, while quiet consistency feels unimpressive but changes everything. The trap is believing that discomfort is always proof of growth. Sometimes discomfort is simply a signal that the approach is wrong. The quietly effective builder learns to listen to that signal without interpreting it as weakness. They stop asking, "How hard can I push today?" and start asking, "What is the smallest version of progress I can sustain?" That question alone changes the entire relationship with self-improvement. Restorative niches. If the first problem with intensity is that it overwhelms the nervous system, the second problem is where we try to build change. Most people attempt self-improvement in the noisiest parts of their day. They try to think clearly while notifications are firing. They try to reflect while being watched, interrupted, or needed. And then they wonder why nothing sticks. For the quiet mind, environment is not background. It is the foundation. This is where the idea of a restorative niche becomes essential. A restorative niche is any space, physical or temporal, where your nervous system naturally settles rather than braces. It is not necessarily a place of productivity. It is a place of permission. Think about moments when you feel most like yourself, not performing, not reacting, just existing with clarity. For some, it is sitting alone in the car before entering the house. For others, it is the early morning before anyone else wakes up. For some, it is a quiet walk without headphones, or the shower where thoughts finally slow down. These moments are not accidents. They are signals. They tell you where your system resets. The mistake most people make is trying to force habits into hostile environments. They try to journal at a loud kitchen table. They try to meditate with their phone beside them. They try to plan their life while already emotionally engaged with others. And the habit fails, not because of lack of discipline, but because the environment never allowed it to breathe. The quietly effective person does the opposite. They build habits inside safety. They do not ask, "How do I become more disciplined?" They ask, "Where does my nervous system naturally relax?" That question alone changes everything. Because once you identify your restorative niche, you stop fighting for attention. You are already receptive. The mind opens instead of resists. This is why tiny habits work best when anchored to calm spaces. A single paragraph read in a quiet corner is more powerful than an hour planned in chaos. 5 slow breaths taken in a parked car can rewire your entire evening. 10 minutes of silence before the day starts can protect your energy more than any productivity system. And here's the critical point. You do not need more time, you need protected time. A restorative niche does not need to be long. It needs to be consistent. The nervous system learns through repetition, not intensity. When you repeatedly pair small improvement with safety, the brain stops resisting change. Growth becomes familiar, rather than threatening. This is why the 1% rule and restorative niches belong together. One without the other eventually collapses. Tiny effort placed in the wrong environment still drains you. Tiny effort placed in safety compounds. Over time, something subtle happens. Your identity begins to shift. You stop seeing yourself as someone who struggles to keep up. You begin to see yourself as someone who builds quietly in places that protect your energy rather than consume it. And once that identity forms, the habit no longer feels like work. It feels like returning to yourself. That is when the 1% rule stops being a strategy and becomes a way of living. The art of quiet commitment. Once you have a restorative niche, the next challenge is not effort, it is exposure. Most people abandon habits not because they are hard, but because they become public too early. The moment progress is announced, it becomes performance. We are encouraged to share goals, to declare intentions, to post beginnings, to seek accountability before stability exists. For some personalities, that works. For many quiet thinkers, it creates pressure that drains the habit of joy. Quiet commitment is the decision to grow without an audience. It is choosing to let progress happen in private until it becomes strong enough to stand on its own. This is not secrecy born from fear. It is privacy born from wisdom. When growth is invisible, it is lighter. There is no image to protect. No expectation to meet. Only the relationship between you and the habit. This is why so many people start strong and fade quickly. They attach social identity to a process that has not yet stabilized. When energy dips, the habit collapses under the weight of being seen. Quiet commitment removes that weight. You show up because it is time, not because anyone is watching. This principle has proven itself far beyond personal development. One of the clearest real-world examples comes from professional sport. When British cycling transformed from mediocrity into dominance, it was not through radical change or dramatic overhauls. Under performance director Dave Brailsford, the team focused on marginal gains, improving dozens of tiny things by 1%, better sleep routines, cleaner environments, small posture adjustments, minor equipment refinements. None of it was impressive in isolation. None of it was announced with fanfare. But over time, those invisible improvements compounded, and the results became undeniable. The lesson here is not about cycling, it is about how progress survives. When growth is protected from noise, it has space to compound. The same principle applies to habits. Writing one sentence a day in private beats writing 10 pages once and never returning. Meditating for 60 seconds consistently beats planning a perfect routine that never begins. Taking one small financial action each week beats obsessing over strategy without execution. Quiet commitment prioritizes continuity over intensity. This is where the math of the 1% rule becomes real. 1% better each day does not feel dramatic, but compounded over time, it creates distance. Distance from old patterns, distance from stagnation, distance from self-doubt. The inverse is also true. Neglect compounds quietly as well. 1% erosion each day eventually leads to burnout, resentment, and disconnection. This is why quiet commitment matters. It protects the direction of compounding. You are not trying to impress the present. You are investing in the future version of yourself. And there is something deeply stabilizing about that. When growth is no longer a performance, the nervous system relaxes. You stop bracing. You stop negotiating. You simply continue. That is how real change survives long enough to matter. Practical micro-habits. Once quiet commitment is in place, the next question becomes practical. What does this actually look like when the day is ordinary, when motivation is low, and when life does not pause to make space for growth? This is where micro-habits matter. Micro-habits are not about efficiency. They are about reliability. Most people set habits that depend on ideal conditions: time, energy, mood, silence. And when those conditions disappear, so does the habit. A micro-habit is designed to survive bad days. It is small enough that resistance cannot build around it. It fits inside real life, not an imagined one. For example, if you want to read more, do not commit to a chapter. Commit to one paragraph. Place the book in your restorative niche. When you enter that space, read the paragraph. That is it. Some days you will stop there. Other days you will continue naturally. But the habit succeeds either way. If you want to build physical strength, do not commit to the gym. Commit to 5 push-ups before your shower. 5 push-ups are not impressive. That is precisely why they work. The body does not resist them. The mind does not negotiate. You simply do them. If anxiety is the pattern you want to change, do not attempt a full lifestyle overhaul. Commit to leaving your phone in another room for the first 10 minutes of your morning. Those 10 minutes matter more than an hour later in the day. They set the tone before urgency arrives. They allow the nervous system to wake up without threat. That alone can shift the entire emotional trajectory of the day. Here is the deeper principle most people miss. The goal of a micro-habit is not the outcome. It is the identity signal. Each small action casts a vote for the type of person you are becoming. When you read one paragraph, you are not trying to finish a book. You are reinforcing the identity of someone who reads. When you move your body briefly, you are not chasing fitness. You are reinforcing the identity of someone who cares for their body. When you protect a few quiet minutes, you are not escaping responsibility. You are reinforcing the identity of someone who values clarity. This is why micro-habits work when motivation fails. They do not rely on emotion, they rely on repetition. Behavioral science consistently shows that identity-based habits outlast outcome-based ones. The brain prefers consistency over ambition. Once the rhythm exists, intensity can increase naturally, but it is never forced. This is important. Many people ruin good habits by increasing difficulty too quickly. They feel momentum and immediately raise the bar. The quietly effective builder resists this impulse. They allow the habit to stabilize. They let it become boring. They let it integrate into identity. Only then does growth accelerate. This is what momentum without intensity looks like. You are moving forward, but you are not out of breath. You are progressing, but you are not straining. Over time, these micro-habits create something far more valuable than productivity. They create trust. You begin to trust yourself because you see yourself showing up even when conditions are not perfect. That trust reduces internal conflict, less negotiation, less self-criticism, more quiet confidence, and quiet confidence compounds faster than motivation ever could. Integration meaning and the quiet compound. At this point, it should be clear that the 1% rule was never really about habits. It was about how change is allowed to enter your life. Most people burn out, not because they lack ambition, but because they try to transform themselves in ways that feel unsafe to their nervous system. They push, they perform, they strain, and eventually, something gives. What you have seen here is a different model, one that respects biology, one that protects energy, one that understands that sustainable growth must feel inhabitable, not heroic. When you remove intensity, something surprising happens. You begin to notice progress not as pressure, but as alignment. The habit no longer feels like a demand placed on you. It feels like a small act of self-respect. That shift matters, because when growth feels respectful, you stop rebelling against it. You stop procrastinating. You stop starting over. You simply continue. This is the quiet compound effect, not dramatic, not visible, but relentless over time. Think back to the elements we covered. The trap of intensity taught you that effort without alignment exhausts you. Restorative niches showed you that environment either supports change or silently sabotages it. Quiet commitment protected your progress from the weight of performance and allowed compounding to do its work. Micro-habits gave you a way to move forward even on days when energy is low and life is loud. None of these require motivation. None of them demand perfection. They only require one thing: consistency without strain. This is why the approach works. It does not rely on who you are on your best day. It works with who you are on your worst day. Over time, this changes more than your habits. It changes your relationship with yourself. You stop seeing yourself as someone who struggles to follow through. You begin to see yourself as someone who builds quietly. That identity is stabilizing. It reduces internal noise. It reduces self-judgment. It frees attention for what actually matters. There is also a deeper layer here. If you believe in God, this rhythm mirrors an ancient truth. Scripture often speaks of growth as something planted, watered, and tended over time, not forced into existence overnight. Seeds grow quietly beneath the surface long before anything appears above ground. And if faith is not part of your framework, the principle still holds. Nature itself operates this way: compounding, not bursts; consistency, not chaos. The universe rewards alignment far more reliably than intensity. This is why the 1% rule feels calm instead of exciting. It does not activate adrenaline. It activates trust. Trust that small efforts matter. Trust that showing up gently still counts. Trust that you do not need to break yourself to build something meaningful. And that trust changes how days end. You stop measuring yourself by how much you did. You start measuring alignment. Did you honor your quiet space? Did you place one small brick where it belonged? If the answer is yes, the day can close cleanly. No mental replay, no background guilt, just rest. And rested minds build better lives. This is Quiet Grind Daily, where self-improvers reset. Calm mind, consistent action, guided by the Quiet Guide. If this moment helped you slow things down, even slightly, that is enough. If someone you care about could benefit from this perspective, you are welcome to share it with them, not to fix them, just to offer a quieter way forward. And if this resonated, a quiet thumbs up or a short comment helps this space grow and reach people who are building seriously, steadily, and without noise. Come back when the world feels loud, or stay for more in the next quiet moment we share.